Hi, I'm Carmen Geddes and welcome to 10 Sisters TV. I am so excited about today's video because we are going to start a step-by-step for EasyPiecing Grid. If you are new to EasyPiecing Grid, there's a link right below this video that is kind of a little overview of how we make quilts and projects with EasyPiecing Grid, which is a lightweight iron-on foundation that has a grid printed on it. And so, but this step by step, I kind of want to start at the beginning. Today's video is about how we design our patterns, how we go about making these quilts. And so the first thing I actually wanted to show you is our EasyPiecing Grid. We print in panels. And so the regular EasyPiecing Grid panels going to be a little hard to see on this because they're very lightweight. The grid is printed on here. Most of the regular EasyPiecing Grid panels are 9 by 14 squares. We print these in 3 sizes and we label them by the finished size. So 1, 1.5, 2-inch finished. We have a 1/2 inch finished. And that we'll kind of talk about a little bit later. It's printed exactly the same way, but it has a lot more squares on each panel. And so we also print border panels. There are videos on those, and we'll talk about those a little bit in a different video, in another step. And so let's get to how we put these quilts together. And so we have got 5 books that we have self-published. These are all the projects in these are designed for EasyPiecing Grid. The Around the Block quilts, this book, the projects are designed specifically for EasyPiecing border panels. The other 4 books, all the patterns are designed for our regular EasyPiecing Grid panels. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite quilts, kind of the quilt that started this whole thing. This is the Mosaic, and so I want to show you how we design these patterns. And we do this is basically the same for every single pattern. When you see one of our patterns, there's going to be, a picture of the quilt, and we're going to tell you how many panels are in that project. And so the Mosaic in this book is a 20-panel project. Right below the picture, we tell you how big this project's going to be if you're piecing it with 1, 1.5, or 2-inch finished squares. And we always tell you the finished size before border. And so that means any optional additional borders that you want to add on, with just fabric. And the other thing that we put in, I kind of call this the cover page. The other thing that we always let you know is how many different fabrics or how many colors are in that quilt and how many squares to cut out. We also do half square triangles. I'm going to show you on another pattern. So for this Mosaic, now the actual quilt that I make is usually very, very scrappy. But because I didn't want to tell you, 20 to 50 different fabrics, I've broken this down into 7 colors. And so there are 7 colors, and one of them is the black, which on this pattern I call the chain. And so we've broken it down into these specific colors, and each one of those I'm telling you how many squares that I put in this pattern. And so this, if you want to go scrappy, then the total amount of squares to cut out, or this also kind of gives you a good ratio if you're kind of going with pinks and blues and reds, and it kind of gives you a good ratio. So the goal maybe is to have these colors distributed pretty well. So we always do that. The other thing that we give you is the yardage for each of those fabrics in 1-inch finished, 1.5, and 2-inch finished. So that's going to be all on this first page. Now the next part of our patterns is what I call the layout. So because we're piecing on a panel, the way we design all of these patterns is we take the project and then just divide it up into sections. So each of these sections represent a panel, and it doesn't matter if it's the 1 inch or the 1.5 or the 2 inch, each of these panels has the same number of squares on them. And so we take that quilt, we divide it into sections. Each of these sections represent a panel. On all of the projects, what you want to take note of is you always want to look over on the right-hand side and along the bottom, because each of these represent a full panel, 9 by 14 squares. But to make this quilt symmetrical, the right-hand side may be a portion of the panel, and I believe this one is 7 squares across without my glasses, I'm going to guess. And then to make it symmetrical on this quilt, notice it is a single row down at the bottom. And on my layout here, I am saying 20, 20, 20 in parentheses. And basically, whenever you see a number in parentheses, what that means is we're taking a piece of the leftover piece of a panel to make up this section right here. So that's what the parentheses mean. And so that is basically how every project's going to go. I want to show you the quilt behind me is also one of my favorites. I think they're all my favorites. This is the scrappy chain. And one thing I wanted you to notice about this project, you can't really see on my whole quilt top, but this project is, I think it's 16. Yeah, this is a 16 panel project to make it this size. What I really like about these layouts is they are really versatile. Oh, let me back up. What I wanted to say about this pattern is on the how many squares to cut out. I am telling you a total yardage and a total number of squares for the whole thing, right? And so don't let this scare you, but this scrappy chain is taking 1,119 scrappy squares for the inside of that. I do give you a total yardage just so you can kind of have, if you're gathering up scraps, it can kind of give you an idea. Anyway, and so when there is a pattern that's very scrappy, I usually give you a total number of squares instead of saying, breaking it down into how many actual different fabrics we used. But the other thing that I wanted to show is that I did not make the one behind me. This one behind me is in that's the 2 inch finished. So we started with 2.5 inch squares, and I did not make a 16 panel. I would have to look at it more, but I think I did more of about a 10 to 12 panel because I kind of cut it off here. And so that's one thing I really like about these layouts is if you want to make this smaller, then essentially you're just going to stop ironing squares, but you will look at this layout and see the pattern, because I don't want to just stop ironing squares. I would like this quilt to be symmetrical. And so I think piecing with EasyPiecing Grid really turns into a very visual process. And so you want to adjust your layout to make it symmetrical. And so don't hesitate. You can put a little piece of painter's tape. You can mark up your book, whatever you want to do. The other fun thing is, what if I want to make this bigger? So let's say I wanted to do 2 inch cut squares for 1.5 inch finish, but I would like this to fit my queen size bed. Well, then on the layout, you're just going to keep going. And so, like I said before, this really becomes a very visual process. And so you can just keep going and you can add squares either way. This layout is more of a rectangle. If I want to make this more of a square, then I'm just going to add more squares, in the one direction. And again, keeping in mind that I would like this to be symmetrical. So sometimes I will go either way. I'll add squares on either side. And that really depends on the pattern that you're looking at. So the other one that I wanted to show you is when we do a project that's got half square triangles. So let's show you a very busy quilt. This is the picture of the Ocean Waves quilt, and you can see it is very, very scrappy. And in the layout, I want to show you what we did with the layout. On the layout, this is a 16 panel project. This layout is more of a square. And so again, we tell you how big it is depending on what size you're piecing with. What I did on this, instead of having it be super scrappy on the layout, I think that would be really hard to follow. This quilt has a lot of half square triangles in it, but oh, is it ever an heirloom? The other really fun thing I want you to notice about this layout is, along with taking that quilt, dividing it into sections, so instead of thinking about block by block, we have section by section, but this scrappy sawtooth border is part of your piecing. And so I love this, so that when you are done sewing up your panel, your scrappy, your first border is already finished, and it's a pretty intricate border. So great way to add a nice pieced border to your quilt. Just make it part of your layout. So what I did on this, if you'll notice, instead of, like I said, going very scrappy, I divided it into 2 colors per what would basically be each block. And so the whole layout has 4 colors in it. It has the background, and it has the 2 colors that are in the pieced blocks, and then it has got this sawtooth border. So each of them has the yardage for the 3 sizes, and it tells you how many squares and how many half square triangles that you are going to pre-sew. And again, the techniques for this, we will definitely go over in our step-by-step videos, but these are going to be pre-sewn, and then you'll put them down on the grid. So now the other patterns that I wanted to show you, along with our books, if you've been to 10sisters.com, hopefully you have seen that we have dozens and dozens of patterns in the shop that you can download. And many of those patterns are small projects, 1 or 2 panel projects. And some of these are going to read just a little bit differently. Now this one is one of my favorites. This is a little spool. Don't you think every sewing room should have a little spool in it? Notice this is a 1 panel project. Again, here are your 3 sizes. Now this scrappy part of this pattern, I've just given you a number. So it's 56 squares. Now I'm admitting to a typo here. Hopefully by the time you watch this video, this pattern will be fixed, because I did not put half square triangles. And there are 4 half square triangles in this project that you need to pre-sew. So I need to add that to this. So you can double check me when you go to download this pattern, that I've got 4 half square triangles on here. And so again, I have put just the total amount of the scrappy. The other thing that I wanted to point out is the picture of the project is your layout, right? So for bigger projects, I'm going to have a picture of the project and then have it divided up into sections. Well, if it's a 1 panel project, that is your section. But I wanted to point out that a lot of times in the picture, I will have the optional outside border and then like binding showing in the picture. And so, sometimes it will give you a little information for an outside border, but a lot of times on these little projects, that is totally up to you, and we're going to leave that to your discretion. Another one, let's see, I want to show you this one right here. The other thing to notice, this is a really fun table runner. We've got lots of table runner patterns on 10sisters.com, and notice this is a 2 panel project. And so when we have a 2 panel project, typically, instead of dividing it into sections, we are going to just have an arrow. It's usually black. Sometimes it's a red arrow, depending on the colors in the quilt. And that arrow is indicating 1 panel, 2 panels. And so again, on this picture, you've got a little framing border and an outside border and a binding showing on the picture. That's not included in the really in the instructions, though this one does say optional borders, 1/8 to 1/2 yard, right? Because you could be making this in the 1-inch finish, or you might be making it in the 2-inch finish. So those borders are really going to be up to you. And the other thing that I'm pointing out again is, and we're not giving yardage on these, but we're telling you how many squares to cut out of each of these colors. And so, the other thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of times when there is a two panel project and you've got it divided by an arrow on the table runner, this first section is a full panel, 9 by 14 squares. The second section, I think it's only 11. It's 9 by only 11. So you're going to have 3 squares left. So you always kind of want to just take note on those 2 panel or others. It's kind of, the concept is kind of like cutting and pasting this foundation to be just the right size for the project that you're making. And so the other one I wanted to show you is this fun little spooky patch. This is a really fun fall time project. Now this is a 3-panel project, and so just like the table runner, notice that the panels are laid out horizontally, where in the spool we're looking at the panel vertically. So that's another thing to look at when you start laying down your squares is, okay, which way do I need to have my panel laid out, you know, so that it matches up to my pattern. So this is a 3-panel, and so here are all your sizes. And tells you how many squares and half square triangles to pre-sew. We do give the yardage on this one because there are several different colors on there. And so I think most of the ones that are 3-panel, we do give yardage. And we're at least going to tell you what I've started adding to a lot of the patterns. And I'm kind of going back and updating some of the previous, is I have a little chart on there that tells you how many squares you're going to get out of a fat quarter, because that's just kind of good yardage information. If you are going to go buy fabric and it's like, well, you know, I need, you know, X amount of squares for this background, but what does that mean? So we're giving a little chart that says how many squares you can get out of a fat quarter depending on what size you're cutting those squares out. And so notice that this layout, the panels are laid horizontal. So there's 1 panel, 2 panel, and notice this one says 3 and 3 in parentheses down here. So what that means is that 3rd panel, we are cutting to the size that we need for each of these 2 sections. And so I hope that that explains how we are looking at these panels or these patterns. And the other thing that I hope that it gives you is when if you have a quilt or you have a pixelated picture that you would like to turn into an EasyPiecing project, well, then this is how you're going to do it. You're going to take that picture and you're going to divide it into sections that typically are going to be the 9 by 14. And so I am going to go on to our next step, and I am super excited, and hopefully this will kind of give you guys some really good step-by-step info. Now, if you've just found us on YouTube, our website is 10sisters.com, and you can find us there. That's where you can find our EasyPiecing grid. There is a locator map on 10sisters.com, so you can find quilt shops in your area that carry our product. But most importantly, that's a great place to go shop for all of our patterns. So check out 10sisters.com. Thanks for watching, and join me on the next video.